So these are all made-up expressions. Let's look at some Greek New Testament examples now, okay? This is the fun part. Mark 14:43. Mark 14:43. Let's recite this out loud together. Ready? This is the first time you've probably seen this, and so it'll be fun to hear you. Ready? Kai euthus eti autou laluntas paragenetai iudas. All right, good. So here we have, this is one of Mark's favorite words, euthus, immediately, and immediately, eti, yet still, autou laluntas. Look at the case of autou and laluntas. What case are those? Those are genitive. That's right. Genitive, singular, and what gender? Masculine. Could be neuter as well, right? But we'll go with masculine, since this, whatever this entity is, he's talking, right? And then paragenetai Judas is Judas came. This is a present being used for past tense action, so we'll translate it past. Judas came. So Judas is what case if he's the subject of paragenetai? Nominative. All right. Normally, my adverbial participles are nominative because they match the nominative subject of the main verb. But Judas here is not the one doing the speaking. Okay? This is a genitive absolute, and the subject of that genitive participle is not represented in the main clause. Judas is one participant. Autou, this he, is a completely different participant. So while some other he was speaking, still, Judas came. All right? So we have two different actors, and that's a genitive absolute. Immediately while he, someone else, was still speaking. Here is Luke 11:14. This is a little bit longer, but let's practice our Greek and read it in unison. Ready? Kai ein ekbalon daimonion, kai auta ein kofan, egeneta de tu daimoniou, ex elthontas, elalesen ha kofas, kai ethaumasan hoi achloi. All right. So we're not going to focus on the first sentence, but that is, and he was casting out a demon, mute, and it was mute. Ageneta de, came to pass, tu daimoniou exelthantas. This is what we want to focus on here. What case is tu daimoniou? That's genitive, genitive singular. What case is exelthantas? Aha, that is genitive as well. I have a genitive, singular, and this is actually a neuter form because it's daimonion, okay? Exelthantas is genitive, singular, and neuter to match. So who is performing the outgoing here? The daimonion. The daimonion. He's a very outgoing demon, isn't he? All right. And I have elalesen, spoke, that's eris, hakofas, the mute man. So who's doing the speaking over here? Yeah, the mute. He's the subject of that verb. So the mute is not outgoing. All right. The kofas is one participant, the mute. The demons, or the demon is another participant. Main core clause or clauses are over here. We also have the crowd being amazed or marveling, right? Again, demons are not represented in the main clauses, but they are represented in the genitive absolute. So we're going to translate this as, when the demon went out, the mute man spoke, and the crowd marveled. Okay? So again, that genitive absolute participle is adverbial. The subject is overt here in the form of a genitive subject, genitive noun. It doesn't have to have the actual genitive noun, though. So whoever's performing the genitive participle could be implied and derived from the context. So you won't always see it in actual genitive noun there.
So where does the when come from in the preposition? That's the stem?
The when is a function of determining which adverbial use we're looking at. So because I've got a genitive absolute that's adverbial, and if I'm taking it as temporal, then I will use when, while, or after, okay? When do I use while? If the stem of the participle is present. When do I use after? When the stem is aorist, okay? When do I use when? I could use it in either scenario. I could say, when you're crying, it makes me sick. That's present stem, if I were speaking Greek. Or when you cried, it made me sick. That would be using the aorist stem, okay? So those when is sort of ambiguous in terms of the temporal nature. Exelthantos is an aorist participle, and so the idea here is that the coming out happened first, right? And then the mute man speaking happened second. Where's the agenita?
Where is it in the translation?
Ah, yes. When you have agenita in Greek followed by the actual action, a lot of times it's omitted. You could translate it if you were being literal, and it came about when the demon came out, the mute man spoke. But most people find that to be rather redundant, and they just go straight to the main clause. All right. The last New Testament example is from John 8:30. So say this with me out loud and in unison. Tauta autou laluntas paloi epistusan eis auton. Terrific. Now, where's my genitive noun or pronoun? It's autou. Genitive participle, laluntas. Okay? And then tauta is accusative. Why is it accusative? Because it's the direct object of the speaking. Okay? Him saying these things. All right? So the tauta is the direct object of laluntas. Now I have my main clause here. Paloi epistusan eis auton. Many believed in him. The many are a group. The him over here, right, is the direct object or the one that they're putting their faith in. So here's an example where I told you almost 100% of the time the participants in the main clause are not represented by the subject of the genitive absolute. But here's one where the object of the preposition him seems to me to be co-referential with the subject of the genitive absolute, right? While he, Jesus, was saying these things, many people believed in him, that is, Jesus. Either way, the subject of the main verb is not the same as the subject of the participle. And that's clear because the subject's plural and the participle is singular. Okay? So, while he was saying these things, many believed in him. So, that's your genitive absolute construction. Let's look at the periphrastic participial constructions. Mounce has a little section on these. Simply put, these are simply forms of the verb eimi, which means to be, used as an auxiliary verb along with a present stem or a perfect stem participle that's going to match the gender and number of the subject. Now, the subject is going to be nominative case, and that means that the participle will likewise be what case? Nominative, because anytime I have a copular verb like to be, eimi or genomai, the predicate will be nominative. And that's what these participles are doing. They are simply predicate uses of the participle, which we've already talked about. Mounce just didn't put this in that same place in his discussion. Now, when are these used? They are frequently used in situations where in the perfect tense for middle passives, third person plural, instead of using that form with the ntai ending, they have been blanked. Greek will frequently use one of these periphrastic constructions where they'll use a form of eimi in the past tense plus the perfect middle passive participle instead. Why is that the case? Because if you have a perfect stem, let's say, you have reduplication, you have your perfect stem here, then you're adding tai right here. If you have a consonant at the end of your perfect stem, guess what you're going to have? You're going to have 3 consonants in a row. That's really hard to pronounce, isn't it? It's very cumbersome. Russian is a language where they can throw bunches of consonants together and it sounds really groovy. But ask an English-speaking person to pronounce a bunch of consonants together, it's atrocious, right? Yeah, exactly, right? The way you say hello in Russian is Здравствуйте, ZDR, zra. That's 3 consonants together, zra. Anyhow, so even to Greek people, using this type of a construction sounded cumbersome or felt cumbersome, so they would just switch to the periphrastic type of construction, and it was easier to do. Now, I've given you some examples from the Greek New Testament where we have this sort of situation. So in Colossians 2:5, we have eimi chairon. Eimi chairon. So what do I have here? What tense is the eimi here? Yeah, that's the present tense of eimi, followed by a participle, chairon, which is the present stemmed participle too. I am, chairon, rejoicing. Isn't that easy to translate? I am rejoicing. Look at Matthew 7:29. Ein didaskon. What tense of eimi is ein? It's the imperfect. He was. Didaskon, there's another present participle. He was teaching. Matthew 13:13. Essesthe misumenoi. What tense of eimi is essesthe? Future, beautiful. So you will be. Now look at the form misumenoi. That is a present participle, but it's passive. So not you will be hating, but you will be hated. All right? And then John 2:17, gegramenon estin. Here my participle is actually before the form of eimi, but they go together. Which tense is estin? That's present, isn't it? But you are looking at gegramenon. That is the perfect middle passive, and here it's passive participle. It is, gegramenon, written. It is written. It is in a state of having been written. Some people like to translate that as it stands written. Okay? So those are some periphrastic participial constructions. All right, last thing I want to do is just talk about the other functions of the participle real quickly. We have seen the temporal uses. A participle can indicate if it's adverbial when the main action happens. We have seen causal uses. The main action happens because of the participial action. And now we come to some other uses. The instrumental use is an adverbial use. And here, what the instrumental use is saying is something like by doing something. So by the participial action, the main action happens. Okay? So example comes from 1 Corinthians 4:12. Kai kapiomen, and we labor, and here I have a participle. Ergadzamenoi tais idiais chersin. And we labor working with our own hands. We labor working with our own hands. How does working with our own hands relate to we labor? It explains the means by which we do it. We labor by working with our own hands. So when you have an instrumental use of the participle, you can use by or by means of, through. Okay? All of those are possible ways to translate an adverbial participle. Concessive participles. Concessive participles are used when the adverbial participial action is unexpected or doesn't seem consistent with the main verb's semantics. In other words, they don't go together. You can use even though. or although as ways of introducing these sorts of participles. So if you look at Mark 8:18, ophthalmos ekontes, there's my participle, ou blepete. You do not see, having eyes. So think about that. If you have eyes, should you not see? No. If you have eyes, you should see. So not seeing and having eyes don't jibe together, right? And that's what you're going to have with these concessive participles, is they don't really go together, and so you're going to introduce the participle with a notion like although or even though. So although you have eyes, you do not see. Kai ota ekontes, and although you have ears, you do not hear. All right? And actually, this is a question, so you need to ask it as a question. Having eyes, do you not see? Right? Having ears, do you not hear? Okay, and then the last section here, there are times when a participle is best translated like as if it were functioning like a regular verb. It's not technically a regular verb, but we're giving it a translation value like it is. Here in Matthew 4:4, hade apokrithes apen. This is an aorist passive participle, but it's rendered in most of our English translations as he answered and said, kai apen, as if it were a literal aorist active or aorist passive indicative form of apokrinomai, followed by an aorist form of lego. Some people say answering, he said, or after he answered and said, but that wouldn't really make sense, would it? Because he's answering and saying at the same time, right? So treating it and translating it like a regular verb seems to do the most justice to it. He answered and said, so forth and so on. Okay? So you'll see that as well in the Greek New Testament.